Hello fellow developers, welcome to the show. Tonight we're going to talk about System.CommandLine and actually another package called System.CommandLine.Hosting, and it's all about getting CLI tools of a high quality, building all the kind of help menus, the version commands and all the rest of it, and getting all of that out of the box for free, and a bunch of other really handy kind of features as well without too much effort, with only a few lines of code. So we'll have a quick look at that, and we're going to do a real world example of a CLI tool I'm building with a colleague at Microsoft. So let's jump right in. So this is actually the documentation for System.CommandLine. You can find it on the .NET docs. Highly recommend having a look at that. I'll stick that in the chat so others can have a look, and we're just going to jump right into it. So in a previous stream you may have seen that I created a .NET Global tool, and a .NET Global tool is just a CLI tool. It contains arguments that are passed in and you do something with them, and then this was a really kind of contrived example where I'm spitting out the .NET bot to the console. But we're going to do something more real here, and you can see that there's a bunch of code here. This is actually the help text that I've had to write to get the help text written out, but all of that is going to be handled for us in System.CommandLine, and it's a lot simpler to use. So the first thing we'll need to do is actually to introduce a package reference, and System.CommandLine is still in beta. So I think this is the latest version of the package, beta 2. So things are still kind of liable to change, but I think the API is fairly stable now. They went through a very large change in beta 2 where they made a bunch of breaking changes. I hope it stays fairly stable going forward, but you can never really be sure. So we can start out by creating this thing called a root command. So a root command is something that you have when somebody just kind of executes your CLI tool without passing in any parameters. So I'm just going to paste some code in now, and we'll write some text to explain what this command is. So I'll write that later, a description. And then we're also going to write a bunch of a handler for this command. So, execute something. And for this code over here, I'm going to remove some stuff. So I'm just copying this from another project that I half finished. So this is our command which is going to run, and I don't think it needs to be async, so I'm just going to stop making it async and turn this into an action. On handle should do fine for us, I think. You can make it async and pass in a cancellation token, I think. And then we are mostly done, I think. Let's see. Pass. Oh, this is a task. And we need to make it async. And we're there. So without too much effort, we need to pass the arguments. I like using the full name rather than the short args. We don't take a cancellation token, and of course we can remove that as well. Cool. So we got one last error here. Command string requires a receiver of type command. Okay. I think that's because we no longer have an async. Parser does not contain a definition for invoke. Am I missing a yes, I think I'm missing, I think that's an extension method. So I'm missing a namespace there. And then this also returns an integer so that it can return the exit code of this CLI application. So when this is handled, I'm just going to write something to the console. And we'll see if we can execute this now. So if we just run this by hitting F5, we'll see what this spits out in a second. So I'm just going to bring across this console window and zoom in a little. So we have an unrecognized command, but that's just because in the debug menu of the project, I've passed in a property that I want to set. So we don't recognize that, but we'll come on to that in a second. But you notice that straight away I have some help information around what this application does. It's got the description for my default command, and it's got a version option. So if I just change this to --version, --version, save that, hit F5 again, this should tell me the version of the application. And I use a tool called minver, and this is telling me the kind of development time version of this application. So it's the major, minor, and patch version plus the git SHA as well appended on there. So that's nice. We have that. And I'm just going to change this back to port 6000, which is an argument I want to be able to handle. And we'll go back to our code. And we have a description here for the root command, but we want to add some options or flags to our application. And we can do that quite simply. I'm just going to copy across a bit more code here and change it around a little bit. I want an option of type integer, and I want to call it port, and I want to give it a shortcut of -p. So you can either use -p or --port, and I'm going to change this to the port to run the application on. So we will need to pass this in to our application. So we're just going to do that. And now we should understand what this port is, but we need to be able to handle it. So the way we handle it is we put in a parameter here on the handle function, and over here we need to add a corresponding generic type parameter. And now if I hit F5, I think we should get 6000. Oh, we should stick the port in here as well so we can see with port, and we'll stick a $sign at the beginning so that we can do string interpolation, and we'll hit F5 once more, and we should get service not found for type int32. That's interesting. So, oh, it's an option of type int. Let's see. What am I doing wrong? Let's debug this and see which line it's actually complaining about. That one is fine, that is fine, that is fine, that is fine, and that is the line where I get this exception. Service not found for type int32. So perhaps it doesn't like, can it not parse integer types? I don't know. I've not tried an integer before. This is the first time trying one. I'm just going to try to see if I change this to a string, what happens. we still get service not found for type. So an integer should be fine. I wonder what the problem is. It must be something to do with this handle function. So there's a few different types you can pass in here. Handle. This is interesting. Let's read some of the exception a bit more carefully. Service not found for type string. The second parameter, so Shaz, he says the second parameter on set handler needs the URL option. Needs the URL option. URL option? Oh, port option. I should probably rename that. You think so? Oh yes, you're right, of course. I missed that while I was copying the code across. So we have something that should, I hit F5, handled with port 6000. Excellent. Thank you very much, Shaz. That worked. Cool. So that we have a root command now, and you can add other commands as well pretty easily. So the root command is special because it comes as part of the default. It's the one that's executed if you don't pass any options to your CLI. But we can also add other commands too, and we can hang them off the root command actually. So you can add another command to the root command. So let's just create a quick command here. New command. We'll call this test command, and we give it a description. And let's see what happens now. So if we execute this, we'll probably need to execute it without any arguments. I wish there was a better way of doing this. Kind of Visual Studio, when you're just mucking around with CLI tools, is not the best tool in the world to develop with. Handled with 0. I want to get the help text. So I want to pass -- help actually. -- help. Say F5 again. Cool. So now we have our help text and we have our test command. And if we execute our test command, we should get the test command executed. We didn't set up a handler for it, of course. So we'd have to do command.set handler and on test, execute that. Generate method on test. And we'll write console.writeLine. Cool. So now we have two commands, and we can now execute the test command by just typing test and hitting F5. Zoom in here, we have test. Cool. So that's how you do subcommands. You don't have to have these if you don't want to. In my case, for my application, I'm just going to have a root command with some options. But you can nest these. You can do all kinds of things. So your commands can have subcommands, and those can have subcommands, and that allows you to do some quite funky nested commands. And that's in a kind of a real world scenario. If you look at the Azure CLI, so if I just bring up if I type AZ ADSP create for RBAC, you can see that this command has like, it's got a root command, a command. No, that's not a root command. It's a sub. There's one command level 1, 2, 3, 4, and then an option. So it can get very complicated potentially. So if you're building something really complicated with lots of nested levels of commands, it's definitely worth using System.command-line, I think. So we have our port option over here, and now we're handling that. Let's dig into some of the System.command-Line.Hosting stuff. So this is okay for kind of medium-sized applications. What happens if you have loads of command handlers and you want IOC and you want to be able to handle some of those in a kind of a more structured way? So that's where this other package comes in, System.command-Line.Hosting. And as you can see, the version is alpha, so this is very likely to change, but I think from what I've seen, this is a quite a lightweight package, so maybe it's not so bad. And the way this works is we plug in one line of extra code into our program over here just before use defaults. And I should clarify, use defaults sets up a bunch of straightforward and default settings for your command line application. So this guy sets up the -- version command, -- help. You can use, I'm not sure what this one, I can't remember what this one does, use environment variables. Allow environment variables to be set from the command line during invocation. Okay. Parse directive, debug directive, suggest directive, typo correction. So all nice things that you want to have in any CLI application. I think I couldn't think of a good reason why I would not want any of these. So I think use defaults does a really good job of providing a good default. So, but you can go in there and explore some of these options. But for the hosting stuff, we're going to add this line of code here, and we are going to implement this configure host function. And for that, I'm going to create a new class. Add class. I'm going to call it, if Visual Studio wakes up, host builder extensions. And just because this guy is a host builder, and this lets us set up our Microsoft.extensions.hosting.host builder, iHost builder. And I have a function here that I'm going to add and copy and paste. So I'm just going to create a public static class here, and we don't need all those namespaces. And we also don't care about CLS compliance. So I'm just going to suppress that in source for now. Ignore that ugly comment. What we're going to do, we don't actually care about some of this stuff, but I'm just setting up a host builder here. This is similar to any ASP.NET application you will have set up in the past. And I'm just going to change some things around. We're going to add logging. Should we add logging? We'll add logging, but only, I think we only need debug logging, debug level logging. Maybe that will be useful if we're going to kind of debug our application. So maybe I'll add Microsoft Extensions Logging Abstractions version 6. And now I can have add debug. Is that where debug logging comes from? I think it does. Or was it Microsoft Extensions.Hosting? I can't remember. Add debug. Let me go check on this other thing I have over here on the side. Microsoft extensions logging.debug. What did I add? Debug. Cool. Come on. Wake up, Visual Studio. Have I got the right version of that package? Doesn't like it. Let me add it through the proper NuGet package page. Seems happy with that version actually. That is the latest version. Not sure why I can't add that. It's odd. Microsoft Extend. We'll just add the namespace here. That was really odd. Visual Studio playing up there for us, not giving us the proper IntelliSense. And then we have to implement configure services here. This is where we are going to configure our service collection, where we can register a bunch of services with our IOC container. I'm just going to rename that to services, and this one can be context. And so let's just kind of briefly talk about how I've set up my particular host builder. I'm just saying that the root of this host builder is the current directory. I'm adding a debug logger here, so that will mean that if I go to my output and debug window, I'll be able to see some of the output from if I'm using iLogger in any of my services that I have in IOC. I'm configuring a bunch of services here, iService collection. So far I haven't done anything here, but I will do. So we'll just leave that empty. And I'm also configuring my IOC container to validate any scopes and validate them at build time, just to make sure I'm not doing anything silly with my IOC container. So if we go back to our application, we have our application all configured. And in my particular case, so if I'll just make sure that it works still by hitting F5. And I don't know what I set up in here. So this can go back to being port 6000. And this is still complaining about something or other. Do you spot the error? Elements should not be on a single line. All right, whatever. I'm using a star cop here, so that's why I was complaining. Handled with 6000. So now I have IOC. I should be able to register a type and be able to use it in my handler over here. So I'm just going to create a services folder, and we'll create a iService. This is just going to be an interface, and that can all go, and we'll create an implementation for it as well. Service that just implements iService. And we are going to register in our IOC container here. Add singleton iService. Nope, not iService collection. iService service. Cool. And now we need to figure out how we're gonna pass that in. iService service. And I think that should be enough, but I wonder if it is. So we'll see if service is also printed out. We'll hit F5. and we get an error. Service not found for type iService. And this is where I'm not actually sure how you pass something in. I know that you can do this. You can do iHost host. So maybe, whoops, too many brackets. Host.services.get required service iService. You can do that. To do that though, you need to change things around to iHost and hit F5. And what am I missing here? Oh, I missed. Did I delete too many brackets? Okay. Let's hit F5 again. And I have my service. Cool. It would be nice to know how I can inject iService directly in here. And according to the documentation, there isn't really a clear method of doing so. So this is the documentation for System.CommandLine, but the documentation for CommandLine.Hosting is a bit more rough and ready. So if I just kind of Google that really quick and go to the GitHub repo where this thing lives, you can see what I mean. So you can go here. Oops, where is the documentation gone? Here we go. Hosting. There was a page somewhere. So not hosting playground. Program. So we have here use host, create default builder, configure services, use defaults, build, invoke async. There's our command. There's our handler. This is the old code. So this is something you have to be careful about. If you see this command handler thing .create, that's the old version. So you can't actually use that. So they are actually doing the same thing as I am. They're using iHost, passing that in and requiring anything that they need. There doesn't seem to be a way at this stage to kind of directly inject the type that you want into your handler. That would be something really cool to add. I could be wrong, but that seems to be my initial impressions from having done some reading and not really come across a way to do that, and just quickly searching just now. So now that we have this application, for my particular use case, I actually want to fire up a ASP.NET application within my CLI. So I want to be able to, this is called .NET New UI CLI command. So I want to be able to actually type in a command similar to kind of .NET, new UI. So that's my .NET tool, global tool. And I want to type port 6000 optionally. I don't want that to always be there. So we can provide an optional value here. And I think optional default value, if one is not provided, get default value. So that's just, and we're going to use port 6000. And I'm going to create a constant for that, because having magic numbers like that is just a crazy thing to do. Default port equals 6000. Default port, here we go. And now we don't always need to pass this port number. And I'm also going to add, we'll leave it for now. We'll leave that for now. So we now need to plug in our ASP.NET application, and the way I'm going to do that is adding a bunch of types over here. So I'm going to go in here and say services.add controllers, and we'll need some types for that, some references, and I actually need to turn this into a web project. I wonder if this will work if I change this to a .NET SDK project to a .NET SDK.web project, reload it just to make Visual Studio happy again. And can I now add controllers? Is that going to work? And I seem to have lost some. Is it that problem where I'm losing IntelliSense again? Could be. I have Microsoft extensions.dependency injection, so that should work. Let's just add some of this here. Split these out very briefly. Oh, that was weird. It suddenly started to work. Oh, add controllers returns an MVC builder. That was why it was failing, of course. I'm also gonna add endpoints. I'm just gonna copy and paste this because it's easier. API Explorer. And that is also a services dot add that thing, and I'm also going to go services dot add Swagger gen because I'm going to create an API here, a Swagger API, and I need swashbuckle in here. I think swashbuckle.asp.NET Core, and I'll stick that in alphabetical order right there, and that should now work. Cool. And then going back, I also need to create an application here. So how do I do that? I want context dot so using a default service provider dot configure host options. Where does this come from? Host builder. Oops. Let's see, host builder. I can't remember. Create web host. Configure web host. I think that's it. Let me quickly fire up another project to remind myself what I need to do here. This is my .NET templating project called .NET Boxed. It's a project template, and it should remind me if I go in here, go to program and have a look in here. There's my host builder, configure web host. Here we go. This is what I want. I'll move that across to the other screen so that I can carry on, and I'm just going to use the Fluent syntax and plug away there. Let's see if we can copy and paste some of this, and we'll paste some of this down here as well from my other project, which is way more complicated. So we're going to create a Kestrel server. We don't want to set up configuration using app settings.json because we don't care. We don't care about Azure, don't care about iOS. Use startup. Should I use startup? Startup's kind of dead in the new land, in the new world. So I'm wondering what can I do here? So if I do figure application builder, and here I need to add a few lines. App.use Swagger, app.use Swagger UI, and I'm gonna also app.map controllers, and this can be made fluent, and this can be turned into an expression body. Map controllers doesn't seem to exist. Do I have the right extension method there? Application builder. Oh, use endpoints. Endpoint builder dot controllers, map controllers. Cool. And that can be turned into an expression body member and simplified as well. So I think now I should have an application, but I really want to be able to specify the port somehow and feed that through. I'm not really sure how I will do that just yet, but let's see what happens if I start this application up. Will I be able to access it on a particular port? Before endpoint routing matches endpoint setup by endpoint middleware, so must be added to the request pipeline before endpoint middleware. Please add by calling use routing inside the call to configure. Oh, I forgot to use routing. App.use routing, and I'm just going to make sure in my other app that I'm doing the right thing in the right order, because use routing I think goes first, then use endpoints, then all the Swagger stuff. Let's try that. So I'm not sure. So I actually need to call app.run at some point. App.run as well. But I don't remember having to do that here. Configure web host. Yeah, it's a tough one. But you can see how the ASP.NET site can be configured like this. There's probably something I'm missing to actually start the site. And I'm just going to add, if we go back here, I'm just going to add console logging as well. So we get something output, as maybe there'll be some startup information here. Oh, we got localhost 5000. That's nice. And we have our console command executed. So if I fire up a new window of Chrome, which I tend to use for debugging and nothing else, because I'm a Firefox man. I got connection refused. So it looks like as soon as the command exited, my application shut down. There's the comment for it as well. So I need to keep my application alive. Now, how do we do that? We need to turn this into an async on handle. So I'm going to turn this back to a task, change this to async, and whenever something's async, we need a cancellation token. And I'm just going to make this wait for a while. So I'm going to say while true task.wait task.delay, sorry. Just going to await that, configure await false, and this now needs to be async, and we can pass in a cancellation token in this as well. That should work. Oh wait, I know what I can do. I can just, instead of passing it in there, I'll just say if cancellation token is cancellation requested. If it isn't, do that delay, make it a shorter delay by like 100 milliseconds or something. And what's this complaining about? Forward the cancellation token. All right then. There seems to be some sort of rule against that I have enabled somewhere. And then this code over here is where System.command.line could use a bit of work. So right now there doesn't seem to be a way to do async functions here, unfortunately. So you have to kind of say, was it func I host int and task, I think it was. Is that right? So I was looking for a set handler async. Doesn't exist. And I don't know why. So maybe that's one of the reasons it's still in beta, because there are some rough edges as well. I forgot the cancellation token, that's why that wasn't working. Cool. I wonder if I can just do that. No, doesn't like that, because it wants this to be an action delegate rather than a func. Wait, there is a func option. So why is it complaining then? Cannot convert from method group to action. So for some reason it's thinking it wants to use the action instead. And the only way I've found of forcing it is to do this. And then you have to kind of do this, which seems a bit ugly, casting a function like that, but that is what seems to work. So if I hit F5 now, I'll get my application running. And it's handled, it's called my handler. The application is still running, and I should have put in like a message here, but that's okay. And then if I load up localhost 5000, of course there's Swagger, so whatever the Swagger endpoint was, I can't remember what the Swagger endpoint was. Swagger, there we go. There's the Swagger endpoint, cool. No operations defined in spec. So at this point, I can pretty up my UI a little bit. I like the UI that my personal website uses to fire up an application. So that's what I'm going to copy and paste over here and output. So we're going to start. I'm going to paste that in, and I'm going to say what port I've started at. So we can write console.writeLine. Oops. We have some time over here. We don't really care about that, but I do care about site running at though. Site running at, and then we'll add so this is going to be Swagger, and that's going to be localhost 6000. And that's /swagger, and we want to indent that slightly, and we want the port to be in string interpolated into this location here, and we'll get rid of that line for now, and eventually there'll be another URL here and UI, and that will not have the /swagger on the end. And we can now get rid of this thing. We don't need iService just yet, but we'll soon be bringing in some services, and we want to type, it might be helpful to have something like enter Control+C to exit, and we have our CLI tool now. We can remove the console editing, the console output and console logging, but we have our site running at this and this, and enter Control+C to exit. And if I Control+C this, my application should shut down and we should be all good. Awesome. That is exactly what I wanted. That's a kind of a quick intro to System.command-line and some of the hosting infrastructure around getting a full ASP.NET application set up in our CLI application with full support for Swagger even. So it's pretty cool what you can do, how you can quickly set it up and throw loads of things that Microsoft has built for ASP.NET and the dependency injection infrastructure at any CLI tool now, and just get something started very quickly. If you want to learn more about .NET New UI, it's a kind of a new CLI tool that I'm building with a colleague at Microsoft. We're going to have a kind of a browser show up, just like I showed you. Right now we've got a Swagger page, but we're building an API endpoint for that is going to talk to NuGet and the .NET New templating engine. And the browser is going to show a nice website where you can install .NET New based templates and uninstall them as well, search for them on NuGet, and then also create projects from them. So that's coming, and that's a cool little kind of hack project that myself and my colleague are building this week. So good, look forward to that. If you want to like and subscribe, that will really help us out in this channel. And don't forget, you can always contact me on Twitter or via email as well on my personal blog. Thanks for watching, everyone. See you in the next one.